Again, welcome back, Michael. It seems like every time we see each other, you've just come off a worldwide trip. So it's good to see you and back in the studio for another month's podcast. There's so much always to talk about, so I'll try to guide us through this conversation. But, of course, it felt like fall this weekend, which means it's harvest time. And driving, I sent you a picture while you're in India of the corn dying back so you could be planning for harvest when you got home. But it's harvest time, right?
It is harvest time. In fact, we're going to start tomorrow.
Harvest time on the farm.
Harvest
You're
time.
doing other harvest work in India.
Yeah, that's right. But harvest time on the farm is starting tomorrow, and it's always a fun time of year. It's a lot of work, but it's a fun time of year because you did all this labor for the last. Well, really, you start planting in November, and then in the springtime, April, May, you plant it. June, July, you care for it with the weeds and get rid of the weeds and other nutrients for it and keep the diseases off of it. And then August, you wait, and September, October, you harvest. So that's the cycle, and it'll be the first fall without one of my sons there. So that's a I don't know what to say. It's bitter in a way, but it's they're busy with their schooling, they're busy with their university work. So it's also another chapter.
And it gives you again another opportunity to work with your dad, and that relationship is so important. But as people that don't understand both sides of your work, most of the work you do, you don't see results. You may not see it in your lifetime. And I know my lifetime, we won't see the end of our work around the world. But on the farm, come harvest time, you see what you've got, and you can look at your yield. You can go out and check your soil to see if it's healthy. So that's an encouragement too, and it gives you something tangible, and you can wrap your head around that I got something done this year, which I know for your psyche, that's really important to keep you balanced. I can really relate to that it's such a valuable anchor to your life. So I'm glad that's starting tomorrow, and I can't wait to come down and visit on the farm. Maybe pick some corn by hand again this year.
There you go.
Cheap labor.
I am the way I'm wired is I'm a realize the concepts. I love concepts. I love visions. I love, in that sense, intangibles, but that are way out there. But I'm also, the first part of my pattern, my gifting is realize them. So I want to see them implemented. I want to see them tangibly in action. I'm wired for action. I'm wired for movement. I'm wired for work. And Harvest definitely provides that because you've been conceptualizing it, envisioning it this whole time, and now we get to go out there and bring the harvest in. So many biblical metaphors, so many agrarian aspects of the biblical narrative, and obviously our work of equipping leaders is very much about expanding His kingdom, expanding His church, and bringing in the harvest. So, and you had mentioned my father. Yeah, who gets to work with their father? I get to work with my father my entire life, and in a common labor, it's a joyful time of year.
And he's still going strong.
He's still going
exciting.
Strong. 1948, he was born,
and I think this has so much to do with it.
He's got
his mind is focused. He's working with his son. He's got a reason to be alive. So I think we watch so many around us that fall off, especially in the church world, that they get to the end of their life and they just stop. To never roll anymore. I've done my work. So
yeah.
Interesting. We talked about this as you got back from India, and yesterday it came up when you were up front teaching about the idea of apostolic leadership. And Keith Cook, one of our anchor legacy elders, one of his last public comment was about find an apostolic team and join it. And I know you saw a new insight for your apostolic leadership, but also apostolic leadership across India on this last trip. what were the insights you picked up on, and then the encouragements that come from that from your side as well? That's a lot around apostolic.
Yeah, it takes, I think on this particular trip, I really learned that it takes leaders that really can see something that doesn't exist and really pull other people towards that, make it a reality, something that's unreasonable and not real today, but pull them towards that. So in different parts of India, to be able to plant this many churches or to start this many churches and root them, it needs a type of a leader that you see in Ephesians 4. And that just became very obvious on this particular trip to India. Yeah.
And anywhere you look at leadership, you're going to see 5-fold, 10-fold, 20-fold leaders that are going to be faithful and do their life work. But they do need that apostolic leader to organize it. And as you say, you use the language, pull them along, get them into the game, and give that voice, that apostolic voice that moves work ahead. So it's exciting to see that unfold both here and around the world. And I think that's the key, to what we set out to do earlier is leadership development.
Yeah, and I think too, I'm realizing a lot of the church through the ages, especially the last 500 years, has been led by managers and administrators, and not necessarily that want to maintain what exists, which there's value in that. But when you're in fields like India and fields like in Southeast Asia, a lot of part of what we would call the global South, it takes a type of a leader who can envision what doesn't exist and is able to move through all these different barriers, all these different obstacles, whether it's money and people and paradigms, where they just keep moving towards the vision. And we have the privilege of being able to work with those type leaders. And so you see that the book of Acts is still alive, still the Spirit is still stirring up those type leaders today, Peters and Pauls of our day. And we get to work with them and get to equip them and stir amongst them and be them ourselves, be those type leaders ourselves. So it's that became just really obvious on this trip.
Let's say you talked about managers, administrators, which are important, but what are they going to manage and administer if they don't have apostolic guidance, calling them to the work that Christ has laid out for us, in the way of Christ and the apostles. And thinking about that, leadership internally here, we just had one of our young men go on his first journey, and this is exciting. And I think he's talked to you about that, and you want to share some of the insights that we got from his trip to the Dominican Republic and Cuba?
Yeah, so I think he's 20. He's an up-and-coming leader for us, and we've seen some of his gifts that need to be developed, but that are there that to be a potential leader. And we've challenged him to go on a trip, work with one of our partners. And in fact, we're challenging all of our third gen before they reach the age of 22 to go and be with one of our partners. So he took the first plunge, and he went to Dominican Republic, as you say, and worked with a great partner we have down there. Is really sold out for this paradigm, this set of patterns that look like Acts. And so he worked he's got a school down there. He's got a water filtration business that is part of their self-enterprising work. He worked with their churches out there, and he went to I think they have multiple churches inside the city of Santo Domingo, and then they went and so he visited those churches, talked with the leaders. They have another set of churches in a different city about 60 miles away, about an hour away, and worked with those leaders. Then he took another plane ride, went to Cuba for 3 or 4 days, was part of their leaders gathering, part of their third gen gathering. I mean, what a great first experience for him. And then he came back to Santo Domingo and Dominican Republic, and then ultimately left from there. So what a great first experience. He's never flown anywhere, never flown out of the country anywhere, and boy, he got a full dose there for about 2.5 weeks. Came back and you can see a bit more confidence in him. You can see a bit more ownership in him. It's just it's something that's valuable on the job training for all of our next third generation people.
Well, it makes me think of that saying, expert has to live more than X miles away from home, and that he gets to travel, and then he goes into these situations where they're asking him questions and listening to his answers. And the question I asked him is, what was the one takeaway that really just resonated? And he said, time. He said, they're always saying, we don't have enough time. He goes, I have the same time you have. Mm-hmm. So you have enough time. I do this, this, and this. So that's not an excuse. You have time. Mm-hmm. And so, but that confidence to speak into that as a young man, that's emboldening. And again, it's setting us up for our generations to follow. So that's a great idea to have all those leaders to make that trip. And our youth make those trips to become not only more connected to that our work, that it's us, but also embolden them in their own work, their language and their speech, that they can speak boldly into the situations around the world.
Yeah, we're really challenging all of our third gen before they're 22. Make that trip. Yeah. Different places around the world. We've got, they can go to maybe 25, 30 different places in the world. So they got a lot to choose from, but we'll help them narrow it down. But it's something that we're very, very intentional about, that everyone takes a trip with one of our partners. And
then you're in India, and you're up in northern India. That never been up at the Tri-City area. You said that, and exciting leadership going on there. Expansion.
Yeah, so that part of that country is very low in Christianity, and yet there's about 200 and some leaders that are part of this association in this Tri-City area. I'd never been there before, but went there. We've got a leader that is really tracking with us. He's a Paul-type leader, and he brought in about half of all the leaders in this Tri-City area, and we talked for a whole day and talked about these patterns and how Acts is still alive today and how it can still transform these patterns in Christ and his message and his good news with his teachings that teach you how to live in the good news can still transform people's individual lives, your family's lives, your family of families with your church, and then have an impact on the community and on the cities. And giving them access, helping with even the illiterate or semi-literate peoples. And I was getting messages from them this morning and last night about how many of the leaders that were there are asking, when can we start? When can we do this? So I spent not a lot of time there. I think just a total of 2 days. And what a great opportunity, another field of opportunity for us in the northern part of that country.
And then you continued meeting with networks around the country, and the numbers, just like, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of leaders that are being impacted. And I know there's a lot of also interaction with the apostolic leaders and the high-level leaders that looking for that energizing input that you can give them by speaking into their work. And as you traveled, I know it's exciting, but it's also weary. How was your experience as you went and met with the networks this time around?
Yeah, so then I went to the southern part and met with, I think it was 13 different networks of networks. So to kind of think about it, I meet with maybe 2 leaders that would come together, and they would represent maybe 80 different networks that are inside of that group. And others would have less than that. Others might have more than that. But I met with 13 different situations like that. First thing we did was I met with all 13 of those together. So that was probably, it doesn't matter necessarily, but 40 some leaders all together and saying, the challenge being, we need to take this paradigm, this set of patterns, and move it across this civilization. And you are most responsible for this. This is, you've been with it the longest. You live here. This is your place, your country. And my goodness, what a bunch of energy around that. And a lot of great dialogue and some robust dialogue about different aspects and different pieces of our strategy. We were able to put together a civilization strategy together. And then I spent the rest of the week, I spent a whole week there, and then followed up with their individual networks and talked with them about strategy and problem solving and doing some specific equipping around some assessment things that I saw or have been seeing. And so what a week. You know, I all together first and then separately, and travel about the city, different parts of the city I would meet people in. They all came to that one location, which was convenient, but still you got to move about the city throughout the rest of the week. I think it was 24 different car rides or chauffeur rides.
Better than plane rides, though.
Better than plane rides. In this case, it was a lot of cars, but and a lot of late nights with people, because you do some networks in the morning and afternoon, and then others you do in the evening, way into the evening, and start again in the morning. So a very productive time, though, in this time with all those different networks, about owning this really for themselves, but bigger than that, owning it, that they need to work together with all these other networks so that we can make expansion across the whole country.
And I can empathize, because they're fighting some of the same battle of the Western model that crept into India, that, to see clearly what the way of Christ and apostles is and to move towards that. That's a challenge when you've got paradigms in conflict right in your backyard. So it's exciting to see that motion happening. And there's practical things coming on their side, that workshops coming up in November. Is that right?
Yeah. There's a big piece of the strategy is these workshops where it gives people an opportunity to access the training, the development, and they can do it all online, and they can do it in their own tongue. Mm-hmm. So this team of 13 networks is working together to provide those workshops. We're providing as a team here some back-end support, some of the Zoom and some of the technical details, but they are providing all the training, all the equipping for all the networks. I think they had over 1,500 people that were part of it, in I think 8 different tongues, and they're expecting about double that this time. And it's happening right before we have our big celebrations. And so that's even more of a motivation for people, because we'll be there 3 different places doing celebrations, acknowledging people's progress. And this is leaders that I'm talking about. And so those leaders want to make progress, have that acknowledgement, so they can turn around and use it with their own people. So we call them working workshops because we want to get work done. We want to see progress, but it's also a workshop. It's on the job. It's not a lecture. It's not a...
Let them do their own work.
Yeah, they do their own work, and they upload their work.
In a supportive environment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And think about that the progress that's taken to figure out the systems and get them working, and accomplishing a structure that will serve them and do it effectively. And, while you're there, I know there's always the push and pull, the give and take, and we'll talk more about what that can look like in a little bit. But as you're going through that, to me, it's always refreshing that you come back where someone has reinforced your apostolic leadership, not through their own voice. And how does that impact you when you hear that is still a very young man, and yet you're given clear indication that they recognize this beyond their own tongue, that you are an apostolic leader? strength and encourage. I know it's hard to take these trips, but I'm sure that helps.
Yeah, this trip you're picking up on the centerpiece of my reflection of this trip, or the centerpiece of what I learned on this trip, was that there's the confidence and clarity around being sent out in a sent out role, and being confident and aggressive in a healthy way in that role. You don't sign up for it, and you don't really want it because of the amount of conflicts without and fears within that it carries. And yet, when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, when you're in your sweet spot, if you will, what else is there to do other than that, and just enjoy it to its greatest end? And that's what happened on this trip, was especially around these 13 networks. As I met with them individually, here and there, in different stories and different ways, they would say, "We want to be part of this. We want to be part of this. We see something, we feel something, we hear something that affirms a prayer that we've been praying. It affirms a vision we had 10 years ago or 20 years ago even, or we've been with this for 25 years, and now we see it's going to last for another generation, and we want to be part of this. And it needs leadership. And I recognize, too, that in all of this, that leaders have to step up. Leaders have to call people forward. Leaders have to ask people to do things that those people don't often want to do themselves. Because we're trying to pull people towards something that doesn't exist. So, and it's to grow the kingdom and to expand the church. And that was really affirmed, that role is needed in the global church, to call people forward. So I don't know what else to say without going 10 more minutes.
Yeah.
But it's,
as one who does the sending, we're sending you as an Antioch situation, knowing what that entails, the pressures that Paul lays out for us. This is what you're going to experience. We feel the burden as well, not in the same way, but I really feel that burden, knowing what you're going through. But at the same time, just have you come back and be energized by the message that's coming through. The Spirit basically is telling you, keep going. And at the same time, as the people in India are hearing that message for themselves as well. And I know one of the things that really resonated on this trip that you reported back was you had a couple that had just gone through a personal tragic situation and showed up to be part of the process. That has to be heavy, but also confirmation. Yes, there are people really engaging here.
Yeah, a personal tragedy. And they couldn't make the big meeting, the big conversation for the civilization and its strategy, but they wanted to make it face-to-face towards the end of that week. It's the first time they had traveled, and even a lot of people were telling them, don't go. Oh. It's your own personal health, your own personal reasons. It's for your own. And he kept saying, we're going to make this trip. And so you're honing in on a specific situation of one of these 13 networks that he wanted to. It was worth some of the risks and worth some of the freshness of what had happened. He said, I'm committed to this for the rest of my life. This is the paradigm. This is the set of patterns why God kept him alive 4 years ago when he almost died from COVID. He said he saw a vision the next week. The vision became clear on what it was to be, and that was the Master Craftsman program that we were unveiling at that point, a pathway for leaders to be developed. And that's another.
Then we can find those stories everywhere you go. That's just one example.
Yeah, it is interesting how the Spirit confirms, even though you get a unique insight into it because we're just, when you brought me to the airport this time, man, I did not want to go. And I showed that through tears. I showed that through some of my emotions. And yet when you get there and you have these leaders say those things, that it's bigger than you. It's not about you. It's bigger than us. And we're servants to that stewardship. We're servants to that work. We're servants to building what Christ is building. And when you're in that, you get a lot of joy. There's a lot of pain in it, but there's also a lot of joy.
Working to be faithful to your stewardship.
Yeah.
A life calling. I know maybe it's a good thing that your travel changed. You didn't get to go to Uganda.
Yeah.
Because some just logistical things happened in the country with scheduling. But that did change your schedule. So you flew back to Amsterdam. And I was really intrigued by this being of Dutch heritage. And it's really interesting here in Iowa, the Dutch heritage, they still look like Holland or the Netherlands in 1850. They haven't quite evolved with modern Amsterdam where you're at. Did you find any respite there? And I know you did some tours. Any insights to I know because you've done a lot of work on your heritage. Was there any insights there about your heritage or just, I'm amongst my people here?
Well, I did. When I was walking around, I did have one guy talk to me in Dutch, and I said, I can only speak English. And he says, well, you look Dutch.
I am.
I said, well, yeah, 5 generations back is certainly Dutch. I was able to get some respite. I did take some rest. I was able to write. I ended up writing 2 different papers. One about parenting, some gaps I see in our own network here about how we need to do a better job of contending for the faith in our children, building that, especially in the ages 6 to 12. I could talk for a long time about this. I wrote 9,000 words about this. 6 to 12 is an age I think we underestimate the value of how much we can actually get done.
Because at 12, 18, we live that.
We overestimate what we can get done as parents from the 12 to 18 range. And so I wrote a paper about this, trying to help our own people, and we're going to go through that. I also wrote a paper on master strategies and why Christ has a strategy and why we're plugging into Christ's strategy, and why the importance of strategy. A lot of people think it's you don't need that. Other people, because the Spirit's going to do 100% of it. Other people tend to think, maybe swing the pendulum the other way, that all we need is strategy, and we just follow the strategy to its finest point, and that's not true of strategy either. So I was able to write some things. I did go on some canal tours. I've been in Amsterdam many a times, but I've never done any. I've never really done much touring. But yeah, I took a canal tour. There's 75 or so miles of canals in Amsterdam. The churches, the biggest sector of people in Amsterdam are atheists. And almost all the churches are there as just tourist sites. They are beautiful. They are very magnificent, but they're not used for promoting, engaging, expanding, establishing, maturing people in the faith. That's a bygone.
Historic buildings that reflect the death of Christendom in Europe.
Yeah. So it's a sad reality, but yet it's one that we know it's a set of patterns is partially to blame for the institutionalism of the church and how the church then becomes irrelevant. It's because it's not ultimately meeting those needs and the real problems in that society that the gospel can. The gospel can bring clarity and bring wisdom in how we live inside of our major cultural problems we have. The gospel still has an answer to it. And the Didache, the way we live in it. But if we make the church an institution, then we can't get towards that. So you can see I was able to see that, able to talk with people about that, but I was able to do a little bit of rest through writing.
Isn't that funny? How work can make you rest.
Yeah,
especially writing.
Yeah.
at least for us. And there you left. The reason that you were in Amsterdam and hung around was so you could go to Paris.
That's
A
right.
couple of reasons in Paris. One is to meet with Jeff, but then also meet with one of our colleagues there. But as we were talking, I was unaware, but we were talking about churches being just landmarks, historical landmarks. And I asked, like you were at Notre Dame, I says, do they do anything in Notre Dame except tours? And you said, no, there's no services, church services there at all anymore. It's like, what a testament to institutionalization of a family organization or family structure.
Yeah, they do religious acts there, and they do some, but yeah, it's mainly a tourist. People. It's a famous place, of course.
Beautiful,
and it's so beautiful. And of course, it was burned, and so they've done a lot of reconstruction on it, and still doing some of that reconstruction now. But again, it's more of a museum, and the church has become more. The buildings are museums rather than building up the family of Christ. So, but I went to Paris. Took a train down to Paris. Took twice as long as possible. The trains were terribly delayed. I missed trains because of an unfortunate accident on the tracks that they had. But I made it down to Paris, and the whole purpose of Paris was to strategize. Jeff came from another large Asian country. We strategized there for about 2 days, reflecting on the past, saying, what is the Spirit doing?
When you're just coming off John as well, did that influence your time there?
You mean 1st, 2nd, 3rd John?
Right.
Yeah.
The Johannine literature.
Yeah. It did influence it because 3rd John, back to a previous point you were making, you got Demetrius and Diotrephes, and they're, one is under the teaching that John is bringing, and one is clearly against it. Diotrephes is really going beyond John's teaching, saying, oh, you need a different type of teaching. You need to go beyond the teaching. And he's undermining John. He's undermining other people. And John is writing, don't follow him. And he's out of step. And John, very much so, because it's we need apostolic type leaders. John was one of them. And they're still needed today. And so Jeff and I are sitting there in Paris thinking we'd sat across from the Notre Dame at one cafe for quite a long time, and one morning and said, what is the Spirit doing with us, especially in the last few years? And what does that mean for the next couple of years? So just reflection, back and forth, and trying to get in a neutral place, an inspiring place. Paris is very, very inspiring with its rich history, and just saying, what is God doing with us? And how can we be faithful to what he's bringing to us? We were able to, I didn't know if you wanted to talk about this, but we're going to talk about it now because we went to, across from the Notre Dame, there's a Shakespeare and Sons, Shakespeare and Company, Shakespeare and something. I can't remember the name of it. I think Shakespeare and Company. Shakespeare and Company maybe, but Ernest Hemingway went there, and so a lot of other
Foucault,
Michael Foucault, of course, went there, and
not the guy with the pendulum.
No,
psychologist.
No, but this is a philosopher, a French philosopher, and we went in there and just wore out our time in that bookstore, and we went there early in the morning, so we beat the rush, and just really fun to be in those places, and then to come out and talk about, reflect about what is the Spirit of God doing today, and how can we be faithful to that role?
There's something about being in a heady place that's stimulating, and it gets the juices flowing. I envy
7 volumes of Michael Foucault inside.
I envy that experience, but at the same time, as you're having this conversation, for me, as one of your fathers, you're sitting with a different father in Paris where your leadership is, solid, moving ahead, which frees the other father to be the sage, to do the work and not distract. So in your reflections, I'm sure that was something that was really encouraging for both of you, that you're in your sweet spots And God's lined it up so that we transitioned wisely and not institutionally. Was that some of your reflection?
Yeah, we talked some about just about how he's born 1952. He's talking about just how there's three core things that he wants to finish well in, and that's really moving in that large Asian country, moving it in the large North Africa and the Middle Eastern areas, and then really doing the biblical theology tool writing in what we call the mastering the scriptures. And those three things make up his spearheading in those two areas as a Apostle Paul type, moving amongst, being the tip of the spear, and then writing the tools down to access those 27 letters and then the 39 letters of the Old Testament. We're going to be done, can you believe it? By the end of this year, by the end of 2025, we'll be done with all 27 letters of the New Testament. And we're going to start then on the third section of the Old Testament, which is the wisdom literature, which is the writings.
Yeah.
And a piece of the writings is the wisdom literature.
You're going to keep him alive till he's done.
We're going to keep him alive. I keep telling him he can't get hit by a bus until...
Pay attention in Paris.
That's right. Until he, at minimum, gets the writings done of the Old Testament. So we like to joke about that. But yeah, definitely God has given us some clarity around those things in these years. And that's, it's fun to be in that.
It's just fun to see our leadership structure confirmed by impact and results. And then from there, you went and visited with Jean Claude, which I'm sure was a heavy time. But at the same time, there's something that's a little disconnected when you're at those end-of-life conversations, which could be, we don't know, but it could be near, could be far, but it's real right now. That there's the beauty in it and the sadness, the joy, the sadness. And how was that experience?
Yeah, when you meet someone who you've known for 30 years, someone that has been faithful, available, teachable. And he's obviously nearing the end. And all those things make it an absolutely significant time together. I learned so much about legacy, I think, because he's very reflective. He's got nothing to, his words everything means something because he knows he only has a handful of words left to be verbose. So he talked about his legacy. He talked about 30 years ago and some notable events along the way, how both Jeff and I were unreasonable with him.
I love that phrase.
And it was interesting because you press him a little bit on, what do you mean by unreasonable? And he said, you wanted something out of me that I thought I couldn't do. And in the situation I was in, all the things I couldn't control were also unreasonable. You wanted me to be here, and I was here, back here. And in that sense, the distance between the two made your request, made your demands at times, your vision, unreasonable.
Throw the Kissinger quote in to explain that.
Yeah, in one of Henry Kissinger's book, I can't remember the name of the book. He's quoting someone else. It's but he talks about how a reasonable man tries to adapt himself to the world, where an unreasonable man tries to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress is determinate upon an unreasonable man.
They're not going along just to fit in. They're going to change the world.
And I knew after I had met Jean Claude that I knew there was a quote that I had read in one of the Kissinger's books, and so I found it on the car ride back into the central part of the Latin Quarter in Paris. But yeah, he really, and there again, it affirms the apostolic role that we were talking about earlier, and that is people have to call other people and their work towards something that they're not doing yet. envisioning something they haven't been able to envision yet. And that's a significant role. He was grateful, Jay, that the unreasonableness throughout his life gave him his life work. It gave him a legacy. It gave him something that's going to last beyond himself, beyond his own family, beyond his own church. It is the first curve of this paradigm is known throughout France because of his faithfulness, his availability, his teachability, and because of some unreasonableness of leaders that he let speak into his life that said 30 years ago, we could do this. We could be here. And it looks unreasonable at the time. But he's looking back 30 years and saying, wow, I'm so grateful that I was part of this.
And it also emphasizes the importance of being part of us as family, that in his experience, that this is his voice, that coming here and sitting in a family for 30 years, same family every time he's here, and they processed all that together.
Yeah.
So he'd bring his unreasonableness to the table, and they discuss that, and all of a sudden it become reasonable.
Yeah, you're one of our senior city elders here, who's been
his
around
brother
for 50, 55, 60 years. I think he said yesterday there's 26 times out of the 30 years he came here, stayed with his wife, and stayed 26 years, 26 times.
He said often, they said around
and they would talk afterwards, during the day that Jeff and I would get after some things and make him uncomfortable or be unreasonable, and he'd come back and be, man, I don't know how we're gonna do this, and this seems unreasonable, and they would just process together in the living room, on the couch, over coffee, over dialogue.
Yeah. To the wee hours.
To the wee hours of the morning. And now he's looking back on his life and he's saying, wow, part of the journey has to be this unreasonableness, because it gets us to places we wouldn't go otherwise.
One of the things we put a lot of emphasis here is one of our tools, Life to the End, our Life to the Mountain series, is to plan out your life, to leave a legacy, to be where Jean Claude is now, and to be able to look back and have that sense of satisfaction, and to be able to claim a life well lived, to be able to say, I lived wisely.
Yeah.
And to come away is what you said, gratitude, that he had gratitude towards that. What a great gift, both for us to hear, but for him to have. And so what a great way to end the trip. And so now you're back. It's time to harvest. Exciting times. And so it's further up.
Further up and further in.